Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 178, Chekhov's Blanket. Getting pulled along by an out-of-control quirk attached to your already injured arm was a less than pleasant experience, in Izuku's humble opinion. What was even less pleasant was getting kidnapped with your former-ish tormentor and ending up in a bar-turned-villain lair as the aforementioned out-of-control quirk continued to flail about wildly, breaking tables, shelves, and skin indiscriminately. He tried to reel it in, but with his panicked heart rate rocketing out of control and the visceral pain he felt with every jerky movement of his shoulders, he could barely hear his own thoughts. "Get the cuffs on him!" He heard a familiar, scratchy, petulant voice order. He's pretty sure everyone in the room was screaming, himself included. He was lying on his chest and could hardly make sense of what he was seeing because everything was a whirlwind of staticky tendrils and pain. The scent of alcohol and blood permeated the air, and when a pair of clunky, quirk-canceling cuffs fell to the floor in front of him, he couldn't think of anything but stop. God, please make it stop. Without even considering the consequences, he cinched one side around his wrist. Glorious stillness rewarded his idiocy. He was on the floor, and someone was crying. It wasn't until someone grabbed his free wrist and wrenched him to his feet that he realized the sound was coming from him. The cries cut off with a pitiful whimper, and he was roughly pushed back into a chair. The other side of the cuffs tightened painfully around his other wrist before he could get his bearings. He was on his, 30-second wind at this point, so there wasn't much more adrenaline left to pump through his body. His injuries were catching up with him. He could taste blood and feel its warm, tacky path tracing down his chin. Damn, his nose hurt. He probably landed flat on his face. Broken collarbone, busted nose, busted jaw, over 72 hours without a proper REM cycle, and he was stuck on the wrong side of enemy lines with no promise of rescue and an additional hostage. Great work, Izuku. Crap. We need to get him to a doctor. You're fine. Walk it off. He heard a man seemingly fighting with himself. Was he talking about Kachan? He looked over to the source of the noise and realized he wasn't. He was fretting over that marble dickhead compress, was it? Yeah. He might have done a number on him. That's a lot of blood, Izuku. A girl suddenly appeared in front of him, licking her lips. He kicked her in the chest, and she went sprawling back onto the floor. Tie him up, you incompetent! I'm working on it. The burned man cut Shigaraki off with no small amount of exasperation. I already got TNT, slowpoke. Take your time, dear. You did a wonderful job. The same man who'd been arguing with himself over Compress's wounds butted in. All right, so Spandex guy was insane. Noted. He went to get to his feet before he could be restrained any further, but the burned man, Dabi, his name is Dabi, lit a flame in the palm of his hand and quirked an eyebrow at him. This wasn't a fight he was going to win. Not with these damn cuffs on. Frickin' damn it. Why did he do that? He did his best to control his breathing and take in his surroundings as Dabi tied his feet to the legs of the chair he'd been thrown in. It was a wooden chair. He could break it just by standing up and sitting down forcefully enough. He'd be left with some cumbersome anklets if he tried, but getting tied to the chair wasn't what was going to sign his death sentence. Just breathe, Izuku. Just breathe. He took a moment to study his surroundings. 7 enemies. Shigaraki, Dabi, Kurogiri, Compress, a man with a lizard mutation quirk, and 2 unknowns. Well, that was crap odds. At least he had Oh, frick. Ch178 was strapped to his own chair across from Izuku, and there were 2 cuts on his arms bleeding freely from his biceps to his wrists. He was bound to the chair with his hands trapped in a metal box in lieu of quirk-canceling cuffs. He was also pale and breathing heavily. Frick, that wasn't good. How much blood had he lost? When did that even... Oh, God. He did that, didn't he? That was where that thing from his palm had wrapped around Katsuki. He saw Compress step through a portal with Crazy Spandex Guy, which took the situation from a 7 versus 2 to a 5 versus 2. But neither of them was in any shape to fight. He needs medical attention. Izuku spoke up with a confidence he had no business possessing. The whole room turned to look at him. I don't think you're in a place to be making demands, brat. Shigaraki sneered at him. Did you learn nothing from our last meeting? Without a hostage, I'm a glass cannon with a short fuse. You lose him, you lose both of us, and whoever I manage to take down with me. You're already down at least 2 allies. Losing whatever assets you manage to gain is not in your best interests, he threatened with cold certainty. Dabi huffed out a laugh. Shigaraki looked downright murderous, and Ch178 was looking at him like he'd grown a 2nd and 3rd head. You're even prettier when you're angry. That really hurt, but I'll forgive you. The girl from before cooed at him, this time from a safe distance. All right, so she was crazy too. Wonderful. Cauterize the cuts. Shigaraki ordered Dabi. No! No, you don't need to do that. Izuku panicked on Katsuki's behalf. I can take care of it. You don't even have to untie me. Just give me some vodka and a needle and thread. Why the hell would I listen to you? Shigaraki mocked. Cooperation, right? You want us to cooperate? You're not going to do that with Burns. Just let me take care of it. How does your quirk work? He turned his attention to Kurogiri. Locations? Aisle 3, bottom shelf, left side, in the pharmacy on the west end of Block 26 in Mustafu. They're sterile needles and gauze. Just take them and give them to me. He all but begged. The shadowy figure just looked to Shigaraki for direction, hardly acknowledging the situation in front of him as he methodically went about righting the bottles of alcohol that hadn't been broken. Shigaraki sneered at him and looked over to Bakugo, who was taking measured breaths and, for once in his life, not opening his big mouth and making Izuku's life more difficult. Shigaraki's eye twitched in anger, but he relented. Do it, he snapped at Kurogiri. Izuku tried his very best not to flinch when Dabi stepped behind him to push his chair toward Ch178 with an awful screeching noise, though he's not sure he succeeded. Jeez, you're built like a brick, Dabi mumbled under his breath after grunting with the effort it took to move him. Some hysterical part of him nearly laughed at that, but panic held the forefront of his mind, so he managed to keep it down. I need alcohol to stare. He was cut off by Ch178's muffled shout as Shigaraki poured vodka over the cut on his left bicep. He used far too much of it, enough that it flowed down and wet Izuku's knee with a mixture of blood and alcohol. My hands, please, Izuku clarified with forced politeness. He held out his hands and let the man pour far too little alcohol out to properly clean them. But it was better than nothing. He focused on making sure his fingers were clean and let his palms stay filthy. He just wouldn't let them touch anything. He watched Dabi's hand reach into a portal and pull out the supplies he had requested. Izuku vowed to make a sizable donation to that pharmacy whenever he had the money. He had stolen so many things from them. Don't try anything, Shigaraki threatened him from behind as he settled his hand around the back of Izuku's neck, just like he'd done at the mall. He did his best to not let the display visibly frighten him, but Shigaraki's fingers were resting against his pulse point, and there wasn't much he could do to hide that. Pressing on, he grabbed the supplies from Dabi and let himself get lost in the familiar motions. Dabi poured a more reasonable amount of alcohol and some gauze, and Izuku warned Katsuki that it was going to hurt as he gently wiped away any potential lingering debris. Kacchan remained quiet with his teeth clenched tight as Izuku carefully added stitches to the split flesh. Shigaraki and Dabi were still looming over them, and now probably wasn't the time for a heart-to-heart, but the words tumbled out of his mouth all the same. "I'm sorry, Kacchan." He apologized. "Shh," he scoffed and shook his head. Izuku let the topic drop. It wasn't until after he had bandaged the first cut and got scooted around to the second that Kacchan replied properly. "I think I was due for some payback," he said. Was that an apology? He pushed down his confusion, something that felt like bubbling anger, and ignored that response. Now was certainly not the time to get into all of that. His hands were more clumsy than he would have liked. They were trembling with nerves and chained together, so the stitches weren't perfect, but they were serviceable. It was better than melting the skin back together, and it was certainly better than bleeding out. Not that he was really at risk for that, but it wouldn't have been an insignificant amount of blood loss if they had just left it to coagulate on its own time. Dabi dragged his chair back to where it had been when he finished, far outside of conspiring range from Kacchan. Izuku kept his focus on any conversation he could overhear, but he didn't get anything helpful out of it. The crazy girl was upset about having lost someone called Big Sis Magna, and Shigaraki was fuming about having lost his tank, which Izuku assumed must have been muscular. Kurogiri was uselessly fiddling with a smashed old box TV on the bar top, and as Izuku looked around, he realized just how many scorch marks were scattered across the place. Katsuki had gone down swinging, at least. "You're pretty good with a needle, Izuku. Do you bleed a lot?" the crazy girl asked out of nowhere. "No, I took up cross-stitch in my free time." He sneered sarcastically on instinct. He was scared and lashing out. He needed to keep his cool. He didn't know what cards he would have to play later, so he'd do better to keep them hidden for now. "Oh, me too! We have so much in common!" She cheered. "I'm Himiko Toga. I meant to introduce myself earlier, but you kicked me," she said with a pout. "Sorry, you scared me." He apologized, though he didn't mean it in the slightest. "Aw, that's okay. I already forgave you, silly." "Toga, stop talking to him." Shigaraki cut her off. Her face scrunched up in a disgruntled pout that could have been considered cute in almost any other circumstance, but she obeyed and stomped off to one of the few intact tables in the corner of the bar. "You intrigue me, little hero," Shigaraki addressed him. "So I've heard," he responded in a level tone. "You have no respect, do you? Why do you insist on following these heroes around? They clearly haven't regarded you as highly as you do them," Shigaraki pressed. He knew what Shigaraki was referring to. He was talking about how he fought and how he currently had several old scars exposed on his midriff, and how he knew how to perform stitches at 16 years old. He knew he was trying to goad him on and admit to having been overlooked by society. He wanted to tug on his tragic past. It was just like every villain's sob story, a poor excuse to lash out at others. However, he wasn't about to hand Shigaraki anything, so he just furrowed his brow in confusion. "You fight like a dog off the street. You didn't learn that in school. Heroes are too altruistic to take what they want by any means they have, but you aren't. Tell me, why is that?" Is this therapy or a hostage situation? He snipped back despite himself. Shigaraki seemed to be acclimating to his snark because he ignored it. "They're never going to accept you like this. You know they won't. A hero like you would get their license taken away in a heartbeat. Civilians would fear you. You're not like them, Izuku. You know that. So why do you bother trying?" They all kept using his given name, and it made him want to punch it out of their smug mouths. No one called him that. No one but his family. Is that why you nabbed us? To join your stupid Girl Scout troop? Ch178 spoke up. With how much of an a-hole he was, Izuku almost forgot that he was smart. He was losing his cool, so Katsuki stepped in for him. I wasn't talking to you yet, brat, Shigaraki snapped. Yeah, well, you are now, he shot back. Shigaraki clenched his fist and forced it to relax before he spoke. You confuse me too, Bakugo. Shigaraki relented. Why the hell was he Bakugo, but Izuku was Izuku? His eye twitched in irritation, but he's pretty sure the only one who noticed was Dabi. The man had been staring at him ever since he insisted on stitching Ch178 up. It was unnerving. He had intense eyes that were difficult to meet. Why do you insist on following those heroes around? I thought you liked winning. They don't seem to be doing a very good job of that lately, Shigaraki pointed out with a smirk. Ch178 growled at him like a rabid dog. They weren't painting a good image of themselves, were they? Kurogiri, why don't you get our guests a drink? Shigaraki pivoted, clearly recognizing that tensions were too high for him to get anywhere with that line of questioning right now. I'm not drinking crap from you, Ch178 spat. Shigaraki's barely controlled tension snapped. Take shifts watching over them. They'll cave eventually, he ordered through gritted teeth, walked out the door behind Ch178 and slammed it shut. I'm gonna go find my cross-stitch. Toga cheered and followed him out, skipping the whole way and leaving the door open behind her. I need to restock, Kurogiri announced, looking forlornly at the ruined bar before fading into himself and out of the room. You all right babysitting? I want to make sure he doesn't dust all of our stuff again, the lizard man asked Dabi, the last one in the room. Ch178 growled at the patronizing word choice. Yeah, I've got it handled. You can slack off all you want, Dabi replied with an affable ribbing. The lizard man rolled his eyes and left without another word, shutting the door like a reasonable person behind himself. The silence left in the room was stifling, especially with Dabi's eyes still raking over him like daggers. Why are you here? Dabi asked him after a tense moment. You kidnapped me, Izuku responded snidely. Shiggy calls everyone a brat, but I think he's right about you, Dabi responded, rolling his eyes. I meant at UA, smartass. Uptown to UA isn't exactly a fast track, he pointed out. He could see Katsuki's brow furrow in confusion. God, he was gonna have so many questions if they made it out of here. He averted his eyes away from both of them just to give himself a second, but his attention caught on a rumpled piece of fabric sitting in one of the booths. That was the blanket they had given Dabi as Ivy. He still had it after all this time? Oi, I'm talking to you, Dabi called his attention back. His exhausted brain listened on instinct, and their eyes met properly for the first time since he got here. Those eyes were familiar. Why did he know those eyes? Didn't your parents teach you manners? Dabi poked at him with no real heat. Izuku laughed despite himself. Parents didn't teach me shit, he replied. Dabi laughed too. You and me both, kid, he agreed, like they were old friends, which Izuku supposed they were, in a way. Dabi intrigued him more and more each time they spoke. How was someone with a fire quirk covered in burns? And why were those eyes so damn familiar? He inherited my father's fire, but my mother's resistance to cold, not my father's heat resistance. His flames burned too hot, hot enough for him to incinerate himself. Tragedy struck the heart of the nation last night in the mountains of Yokohama Prefecture. Toya Todoroki, the firstborn son of Japan's #2 hero Endeavor, died in a quirk accident at just 13 years old. Official reports say he was practicing with his quirk on the family's land when it got out of control and started a forest fire. No body could be recovered from the flames. Toya? The name tumbled out of his unfiltered mouth. Dabi's relaxed posture and amicable expression faded in an instant. He stood up from where he'd been leaning on the bar and held his hands up at his sides as if he were about to use his quirk. "What the frick did you just call me?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. Nothing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He stuttered out pitifully and covered his face with his restrained arms. "Oi, piss off, dude. Boss isn't going to be happy if he comes back to one of his hostages turned into bacon." Ch1 spoke up from the other side of the room. "I'm sorry. I won't say a word. I'm sorry," he babbled, peeking at the man from behind his hands like a frightened child. "Do you two know each other?" Ch1 interrupted. "Shut it, twerp." Dabi sneered at Kotsky before turning back to him. "How do you know that name?" he demanded. I didn't. I know your brother. I didn't know. It was just a guess. I didn't mean to." "Quit stuttering and calm the hell down." Dabi cursed violently, but his tone was juxtaposed by him lowering his hands and taking a half step back. Izuku forced himself to take steady breaths and lower his arms, but he didn't take his eyes off of Dabi for a second, not even to blink. Dabi was looking at him with the same disgusted glare that Endeavor gave him, like he was a piece of shit stuck to his boot, but he wisely kept that comparison to himself. "You didn't answer my damn question. What the frick are you doing with those spandex-wrapped attention whores? Uptown's a shithole because they abandoned it." Dabi repeated his question much less amicably. "Not all of them," he argued. Dabi scoffed. "What are you doing here then, He pushed back. "Are you really asking me that?" Dabi drawled. "They're trying to take down All Might, not... They're just gonna give him what he's always wanted," he argued without giving anything away to their audience. "They're a platform, a tool for my own means," Dabi justified. "They're hurting people. You're hurting people," he pointed out. "That's kind of the point, dipshit," Dabi spat back. "You don't want to hurt people. You want to hurt him. You don't know shit about what I want. You saved me. When I was being followed home, you saved me. Someone who wants to hurt people wouldn't do that," he argued. "I was young and delusional," Dabi tried to excuse. "That was like 2 years ago." "People change," he replied with cold sarcasm. "There's another way. You're right. That piece of shit deserves whatever you're trying to do, but we can do it without hurting anyone else. I was trying to get your brother out of there. I have proof. We could ruin him." Izuku all but begged the man to listen. Dabi regarded him for a moment, looking him up and down, and he probably looked pitiful right now. He looked every bit of a kid in over their head. "Sure, kid." Dabi dismissed him. He sounded sad, like he wanted to believe him but couldn't. Dabi had his back twice now. He'd been looking out for him in Uptown, and he'd refused a better blanket in case someone else needed it. He might be an a-hole, but there was good in him. Izuku knew there was good in him. He was just damaged and hurting and lashing out however he could in a hopeless situation. He just needed Dabi to trust him. God, this was such a bad idea. "You've still got the blanket," he noted, nodding to the ragged piece of fabric. "I thought I told you not to get into anything too heinous." "I'd say this qualifies as heinous," he said with a pointed look. Dabi glanced over at the blanket, then back to him, twice over before his expression settled on bewilderment. "No freaking way," Dabi muttered half under his breath. "Tit for tat. You need to trust me, Dabi. We can take him down. I already have everything we need," he pleaded, Or do you really want to be taking orders from that walking temper tantrum? What the frick are you two on about? Katsuki butted in, his patience seeming to have worn out. Shut up, Pipsqueak. The adults are talking. Dabi shot over his shoulder with a wicked smirk on his face as Katsuki predictably started cussing him out. Dabi stepped closer to him and spoke in a hushed tone. What do you have? Video proof of his actions and audio testimonies from all of your siblings. How the hell did you manage that? He chewed his lips awkwardly for a moment before replying, Bugs. He admitted shamefully, You frickin' bugged my little brother? No, I bugged the house, he corrected. Dabi just looked at him dumbly for a moment. What the frick? We're friends. I already talked to him about it. He just hasn't made a decision as to what he wants to do with it yet. If I tell him that No. Dabi cut him off. He looked sad and angry all at once, but more than anything, he looked determined. Some part of him still cared about his family, sans Endeavor, of course. It was pretty obvious to see that. You're the nail in the coffin, Dabi. We can't just not... What were you planning to do? Izuku cut himself off with a question because how the hell had Dabi planned to take down Endeavor without revealing that Tuya was still alive? Dabi quickly averted his gaze, and Izuku saw a flash of something that looked like shame before he turned away entirely and let a frustrated groan out into his hands. He hadn't planned on being around long enough to see the consequences of what he was scheming, had he? Look, okay, we don't need to figure this out now. He called Dabi's attention back to in a tone he knew was too low for Katsuki to hear. 10 days after I get out of here. Dabi scoffed out a laugh. We're getting out of here. This is going to work. Just listen to me. 10 days after I get out of here, meet me in the warehouse on block 12 at midnight. I just need you to be seen walking around this building, okay? Eraser's going to have eyes on the ground everywhere. Where are we? Dabi hesitated and glanced over to the busted television before he answered, Camino. Okay, that's not ideal. Never mind, it'll be enough. You don't even need to blow your cover with them. Wait, hold on. I'm a freaking idiot. Check my pocket. Is my phone in there? Dabi stepped forward and patted down his hips before pulling out the blessed piece of technology. You guys suck ass at kidnapping people. I have a tracker on... Dabi turned the phone around to show a huge crack on the screen, nearly splitting the entire thing in half. Shit. Does it turn on? He pressed the button on the side and nothing happened. Damn it. Fine. They might still be able to track it, but I doubt it. Back to plan A. My friends saw you. They're going to get that report back to Eraser. He and Nedzu are going to have half the country looking for you. Make sure you're seen and they'll find us. Avoid heroes if you can, but if you get captured, I'll vouch for you, he assured. Are you going to clue me in on what the hell is going on at any point, Deku? Katsuki interrupted their hushed conversation again. God, he was going to be a problem, wasn't he? Izuku had been surprised by how few questions Katsuki had asked over the semester. Of course, that was with the constant threat of expulsion should he push Izuku too far. But this was going to tip the scales toward giving in to his curiosity. Furthermore, it would be a PR nightmare if UA expelled one of the students who had been kidnapped on their watch. Izuku might not even have that bargaining chip anymore. Damn, this is really going to be a problem. I need you to not question anything I do or say, and we will get out of here. Just follow my instructions and we'll be fine. Please, he begged, because that's all he had left right now. He was running on fumes, and he couldn't make another piece fit into the puzzle he was forcing together. Kachan was just going to have to trust him. Katsuki looked him up and down with a scowl. before turning to Dabi and repeating the process. When his eyes flicked back to Izuku, he held his gaze for a moment before nodding. It felt like the weight of the world fell off his shoulders with the relief. They were going to trust him. Both of them. That was all he needed. They could do this together. End of chapter.